Hi, this is Scott Wilkinson, host of Home Theater Geeks. In episode 309, About.com's home theater expert Robert Silva and I answer questions from the chat room. So stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Home Theater Geeks is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This is Home Theater Geeks with Scott Wilkinson, recorded June 23rd, 2016. Episode 309, Chat Room Q&A. This episode of Home Theater Geeks is brought to you by Epson's new EcoTank printers. With Epson's line of SuperTank all-in-one printers, you can print thousands of documents without running out of ink. EcoTank is loaded and ready to print when you are. Visit epson.com/ecotank to find out more. And by Corning. Corning's incredibly durable Thunderbolt and USB 3-point optical cables are longer, thinner, lighter, and stronger. Go to corning.com/twit to save up to $130 on their superior Thunderbolt optical cables. Hey there, Scott Wilkinson here, the home theater geek and editor of avsforum.com. This week's guest geek is Robert Silva, the home theater expert at About.com. Hey, Robert, welcome back.
Hi, thanks, Scott. Glad to be back. I hope this is a fun afternoon.
Oh, I have no doubt it will be. In fact, what we're doing today is answering questions from the chat room. So those of you who are logged on live at live.twit.tv, you can go to the chat room there. You can also go to irc.twit.tv and post questions, anything you want to know about home theater, audio, video, and we will do our best to answer them to the best of our ability. Now, we don't know everything. We both know quite a bit in this field, being SMEs, as I've heard this term recently, subject matter experts. But, you know, there are certain things that we might not know. And, of course, those of you in the chat room might know something that we don't. And so if you hear a question that you know something about, please do post it in there, because that will help us make sure everybody gets their questions answered. So there is, and those of you who are watching the video will now see the chat room, and we're going to go right to the chat room. And interestingly, iPhone 81074 is asking a question about what we were talking about before the show started. I had gone to see the movie Finding Dory, which is Disney Pixar's latest animated feature. And I was saying that my wife is quite sensitive to loud volume, and she doesn't really go to movies much anymore, including she didn't go to Finding Dory. And I found it to be not terribly loud myself. I measured it in the, I think, mid-80s dB or so. And but that, you know, that was average over the entire thing. The highest peak was something like 116. So it was pretty, you know, the peaks were very loud. But generally speaking, not terribly loud. I can't remember anything that was super loud about it, particularly to answer your question, what's loud in there? It wasn't particularly loud. But to those with hyperacusis, which is a medical condition that is a super sensitivity to volume, you know, just about anything can be painful. Robert, do you go out to the movies much, or do you stick with your home theater?
Mostly the home theater, but I was going to say the last film I actually had a chance to get out and see is I did see the Force Awakens, and I really, really enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm. That was great fun.
Yeah.
Now you live down in the San Diego area, and they don't have any. They don't have any Dolby Cinemas down there. They must have IMAX, right?
Yeah, they have IMAX and several Dolby Atmos theaters, so yeah, that's not an issue. And they've had both, and of course IMAX 3D, and that type of thing. The only issue I had during one showing of an IMAX film was on a the second Star Trek Into Darkness, and the problem there in the particular theater I saw it is that the aspect ratio was a little stretched, because I think it was yes, it wasn't exactly properly framed for the projector and the screen, and my friend was really bugged by it. But I was going, this is kind of odd. We did mention it, and we did get some tickets to another movie, but we did mention it. We did mention it because obviously they're not going to stop the movie halfway through and try to figure out what's going on. So
right. Although this brings up a very important point that I've heard. I post about the movies that I go to, and I've seen quite a few comments that say, that even a Dolby Cinema, which should have a very high quality level through any Dolby Cinema you go to, some of them seem to be not as good as others. And other people say, yeah, I didn't go to a Dolby Cinema, but I went to this other place and things were really screwed up. The sound was terrible, or the picture was grainy or something. And so it's amazing to me, the variability of the quality of the presentation in the commercial cinema.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Like we have an ArcLight in La Jolla, and I got a chance to check out their Dolby Atmos theater. And I thought it was kind of a small venue, considering that they were showing these, big blockbuster movies with Dolby Atmos and everything. Dolby Atmos was fine, but I thought it was rather a small theater.
Yeah. Do you have Atmos in your home theater?
Glad you asked that. Actually, I have. Well, no, I have actually in for review this summer. I have an Onkyo TX 555, which is their least expensive receiver with Dolby Atmos. And I also have an Anthem AV that I just got in, MRX 720, which is a $2,500 receiver, which is their Dolby, their entry level Dolby Atmos receiver
at $2,500, whereas the Onkyo is probably about $500 or $600.
Right, and for that one I'm using the Martin Logan modules, and then for the Onkyo I'm using the Onkyo moduels.
Those are the up-firing modules.
Right. Yeah. I'm not going to cut my ceiling.
Well, unless you install something permanently.
Well, that's true. I guess I could. Yeah.
But you do need to review some of these up-firing speaker modules and so on.
Oh, yes.
Well, THX1138 is asking a related question. Why so little immersive audio like Dolby Atmos or DTSX over a year after they've become available? Now, I've heard it said that and I don't think we can answer that question reliably because it's up to the studios how they want to release their discs. But I have heard it said that many movies come out on Blu-ray that were available in Dolby Atmos in the theater, but they don't have it on the disc when it comes out. And have you? Yes. What do you think?
Yes, I've encountered that too, and I don't have the specific movies on hand. In my mind.
Yeah.
But yes, I have encountered that. And I go, oh, this is interesting. This is, it's like they put like a DTS HD master audio track rather than Dolby Atmos or something. And not only that, but there are an increasing number, because Dolby sends me a pretty good clip of Dolby Atmos encoded Blu-rays. And I actually have, and I haven't even opened the boxes yet. There's just too much to watch. I have all 5 seasons of the Game of Thrones.
Oh yeah,
and that's all Dolby Atmos.
Wow, and does it have Dolby Atmos on the disc?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's But there's a counterexample of something that has come out with Atmos on it.
Was not originally broadcast with Atmos.
Right. That's right. Yeah. So they remixed it for the disc.
Right.
With Atmos. That's very, very interesting.
Yeah. But since I haven't had a chance to really check it out, which I probably will when I review these 2 receivers, is that whether or not it's an effective remix or or if they ended up mixing it originally and then mixed it down for TV.
Mixed it down for TV.
Yeah.
Are you a Game of Thrones fan? Have you been watching the series?
No, no.
Yeah.
There's so many things to keep track of that I have. I've seen a couple episodes, but I go, I just, it's just too much. I just can't get into all this. So I think what I'm going to do is end up binge watching.
5 seasons worth. Oh man.
No, not all at once. I think what I'll do is one season a month or something.
Yeah, something like that. Hermes is asking, what's the most mind-blowing home theater you've ever seen?
Oh, gee whiz, the most mind-blowing home theater I've ever seen. Oh.
That's a tricky question. I do a thing called Home Theater of the Month on AVS, where I profile, different high-end home theaters, and there are some pretty amazing ones. Probably one of the ones that comes to mind is the one I did in Texas when we were at CEDIA last year. There was one about 30 miles outside of Dallas that we actually did. We went and shot video in the theater, and I interviewed not only the home theater owner, guy by the name of Chris Barber, but also Dennis Erskine, who designed and more or less built the theater, and that was incredible, really amazing. It's called the Barber Theater. If you go on AVS Forum and check it out,
I'll check that out.
Yeah. Do you spend much time, looking at other people's home theaters, or you're mostly concentrated on reviewing product and making sure that
stuff like that? Yeah, but but what I have done is that I've had 2 friends that I helped convert their film home theater into video. Boy, talk about a challenge.
Wow.
It's like, why do I need surround sound? My big mono Electro Voice system is, what I'm saying is that and so, they want to use the same screen and all that. So basically, we would end up getting in several different projectors and things like that. And it was more of a DIY type of thing. We didn't have it was sort of like a friend project more than getting an installer in.
Sure.
But we would experiment with bipolar surrounds and things like that. And that was a challenge. But at the end of the whole process, they really got into the surround sound and to the video portion. So, but it is also an interesting experience, especially nowadays, to go into a home theater that still uses film.
I can't imagine. There are still such places?
Well, you're talking about people that my age and older that they started out, they were home theater geeks when film was the only thing available. And so they did 16 millimeter. And then, most of this is 16 or Super 16. But also one guy, though, he did have a 35 millimeter projector. So that was pretty impressive.
That's pretty impressive. But of course, getting a 35 millimeter print or a 16 millimeter print of movies, of commercial movies, must have been challenging.
Yes, and also with the color fading and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a couple questions in here about earplugs. We were talking earlier about volume levels, and I've done a lot of research into earplugs. I myself have a pair of custom-made earplugs. Have you ever gone through that, Robert, getting a pair of custom-made earplugs? It's kind of interesting.
No, I haven't. Yeah, no, I haven't.
Yeah, you go to an audiologist, and they squirt goo into your ear, and you have to sit there and let it harden. And then it hardens after a few minutes, and they pull it out, and that's a mold for the earplug. And then they send that out to the company that makes the earplugs. Etymotic is one company. I like the company Sensophonics in Chicago. And they come back and then they send back this earplug, and it's custom made to your ear canal, and it's got a little insert in it, and you can put in different filters that filter out that attenuate the sound by different amounts. And they are much flatter in frequency response than those typical, foam earplugs, those bright orange ones or bright green ones. they're much flatter, and you get more of a sense of the music or the sound without really disturbing the frequency response terribly. I mean, they're not perfect, but they're a lot better, for sure.
Huh. I'll have to check that out. That does sound like a really good idea.
It really is, especially, I mean, I take them to movies very often, you know. Also live concerts. I mean, especially like rock concerts, things like that. It's just really, really good. It just makes it so much more comfortable. And I can't recommend this highly enough, especially to young people, because hearing damage is cumulative. And it takes a while to become evident. So as in your teenage years, in your early 20s or whatever, you go, oh, I'm going to concerts and I'm standing right next to this gigantic tower of speakers and it's 130 dB. And yeah, my ears were ringing when I left, but it went away and it was fine. Well, it went away, but it's going to come back. So take care of your hearing while you're young, because when you get older, it's irreversible. It cannot be fixed. So that's all I'm telling you. Okay, so let's see here. Otherwise, earplugs, those foam ones are okay. Etymotic makes kind of another generic earplug that looks kind of like 3 cups nested within each other. Those are better than your typical foam plugs. So that's all I can say about that. Now, here we go. Creamy Corncob's asking a question. What are the advantages or disadvantages in terms of sound quality and power handling? I'm not sure we can answer that, but sound quality we can probably talk about in electrostatic speakers versus conventional dynamic speakers. Do you have much experience with electrostats?
Martin Logan's, it's obviously I've never owned any, but I always make sure when I go to the trade shows that if Martin Logan's there with their electrostatics, I always check it out. And
do you like the sound quality that you hear there?
I like the sound quality, but obviously they're playing their stuff. In other words, what I need to do is probably bring some of my own stuff and say, here, can you play this? I want to hear.
Exactly.
But I do have one Martin Logan story. This was from several CDs ago, and this is the first time. This is when all this digital playing from iPods and things like that first started. So it's a long time ago. But I was in this demo room and they were demoing these Martin Logans, and I was like, oh, this really sounds great. And I says, what's your source? I was thinking, is it high quality vinyl? Is it, a CD, SACD, DVD audio? It was from an Apple iPad. And he was just feeding it off the iPad into their amp, into their integrated amp or whatever, and into the Martin Logans, and it sounded really good.
Wow.
Now, obviously, there was no way to do an A/B comparison as far as, well, gee whiz, but that's what they had in their demo room, and it sounded really good. But do you happen to know what the compression factor was on that music? Maybe it was uncompressed. I bet you it was lightly compressed in any event. Yeah, it was. It's been a while back, so I don't remember but
I understand.
But it's just amazing. And of course now with the high res audio stuff, it's I know there's a big debate, on does high res audio really sound better? But at least they're making the attempt to to do something about all that compressed music. I just feel bummed out. Like for instance, I do when I review receivers and things like that, I test Bluetooth and stuff like that, and oh my God, the sound quality off the Bluetooth is just like, oh my. Give me my CD back.
Please, even CD. Yeah, I find it interesting that high-res audio is sort of trying to go in the opposite direction.
Right.
From always it comes down to the question of convenience versus quality, right?
Yes.
I mean, see, MP3s and highly compressed music is very convenient because you can download it quickly or you can stream it easily. You can store it in your iPad and many, many thousands of songs. Whereas high-res audio is, consumes more bandwidth, but it sounds better.
Yes.
And so a lot of people say, well, yeah, but storage is getting so cheap and bandwidth coming into the home is getting much better, much faster, generally speaking. So, we can listen to high-res audio or something close to it without having to have that high compression factor. Right. You've probably heard or studied some about this MQA thing.
Yes, a little bit. It's a little bit out of the home theater mix, but a little bit, yeah. But I've checked out a couple things, but I don't have a real definitive opinion on it yet.
Yeah, in fact, at the show Newport, which was just 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was down there, and for the very first time, I got to hear an uncompressed original high-res audio file, and then the MQA encoded version of it. And whereas the master, the original master, was at 5 megabits per second, or even as much as 10 megabits per second, the MQA version was 1 megabit per second. So it was a factor of 5 or 10 reduced, which is akin to taking a CD down to 256 kilobits or 128 kilobits. And the amazing thing to me was I could hear no difference.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So they're doing the other finagling they're doing, or processing or algorithms or whatever, is somehow making making it more efficient or something.
Exactly. Making it a lot more efficient, which means more efficient to stream, consuming less space on any storage device, even though storage is cheap now. That's certainly true. But hey, who wouldn't want to put more on a given piece of storage, no matter how inexpensive it was?
Yes, absolutely. Well, and in terms of streaming, it's like they've got one of the problems is that the video quality's been steadily getting better, but you need higher bandwidth, and then to do uncompressed audio or to do high-end audio. On streaming, you're just talking so much bandwidth that it's going to eat up your data cap for the month.
Well, there's the data cap issue as well. That's exactly right. I mean, Tidal, TIDAL, is the highest resolution streaming service that we know of out there, and their best stream is CD quality, not more than that.
Right.
So there is some issue there that I think is worth exploring. Getting back to for a moment, just to the electrostatic versus driver dynamic speaker question. The one thing I wanted to add to that was that electrostats are great in the mid and high frequencies. Really good. In fact,
I forgot to mention it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, Robert, that whenever I've heard Martin Logan's or anything like that, they just sound so fantastic in the mid to upper range, but they don't do really well in the bass frequencies. And so very often you either need to have a subwoofer or these speakers have a large dynamic cone driver in the bass to reproduce the low frequencies. So I find that very interesting as well.
Yes, that's correct.
So let's see. Emily the Strange is asking, are there movies shot that cater toward the viewing of the movie, whether it would look better on projector or TV? I don't think so. Not that I would imagine. They shoot the movie to look as good as it can. Probably on commercial cinema at first. I don't know. What do you think, Robert?
What they should be doing, and some studios do this, is that they do tone mapping and grading and all that stuff. They have to redo all that for the home environment as opposed to the theater environment, because you have to realize is that in a theater environment the image is dimmer, except now that they have high dynamic range. But I meant ordinarily
it's still a lot dimmer than what you get at home. That's true.
Dimmer. And TVs and even home theater projectors can put out, because you're talking in a smaller venue, put out more light, and
smaller screen.
They have to. Yeah. They have to grade regrade the contrast so it's not overly bright or underly bright. Avoid the crushed blacks and that type of thing. They have to, and also the color is going to be different. They have to, I'm not sure if now that they're doing digital projection, I know I know that the color standards translate easier now into the home, but I know that there are, when you're talking about Rec 709 and stuff like that, that's different than what you're seeing on a movie theater screen.
Correct. That is correct. You're exactly right. The standard that we've had up till now for the home is a smaller range of colors or color gamut than what you see in the commercial cinema. But now that we have high dynamic range displays in the home, we're getting closer to that that commercial cinema color gamut. And so the difference there will be less and less as time goes on.
Right.
Well, we got more questions for sure, but before we continue, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor for this episode, one of them, which is Epson. It's Epson's revolutionary EcoTank line of printers for home and office, which introduce a new age in printing. The new EcoTank ET4550 wireless all-in-one printer doesn't use ink cartridges. Instead, it features an innovative refillable ink tank, earning it the title of CES 2016 Innovation Awards honoree. The EcoTank ET4550 comes with enough ink to print up to 11,000 black pages or 8,500 color pages, equivalent to about 50 ink cartridge sets. You're loaded and ready to print for up to 2 years. Powered by Epson's leading-edge precision core technology, it delivers high-speed, vivid colors and laser-quality black text, plus auto two-sided printing, a 30-page auto document feeder, and easy wireless printing from tablets and smartphones. All EcoTank printers deliver an unbeatable combination of convenience and value with ultra-low-cost replacement ink bottles. The Epson EcoTank system was named a 2016 Small Biz Windows Printer of the Year. Also, Epson recently released their Creative Print app, making it easier to preserve your Instagram and Facebook photos. Download the app to create personalized photo collages, custom greeting cards, stationery, and coloring book templates. You can also print photos directly onto CDs and DVDs. Be creative on the go. Print from your mobile device to a variety of compatible Epson all-in-one printers within your wireless network. Visit epson.com/ecotank today to transform the way your home, office, or work group prints. For the best combination of ease and value, turn to the new Epson EcoTank printers. That's epson.com/ecotank. And we thank Epson very much for their support of Home Theater Geeks. Epson, exceed your vision. So I'm talking with Robert Silva, the home theater expert, much like the home theater geek here at about.com. We're answering questions from the chat room. And iPhone 81074 asks, getting back to the whole Atmos at home question, do you really have to cut into the ceiling? Can't you hang the Atmos speakers from the monkey tails or nail them to the ceiling? There are certainly on-ceiling Atmos speakers that one could get.
Yeah, you could do that. The whole idea of Atmos is you want sound coming from above you, whether you do it from projecting it up and reflecting it off, or which is not quite as good. But if you actually have it directed down, it doesn't necessarily have to be in the ceiling. I mean, that's what the speaker companies are kind of marketing. But if you do on ceiling, if you have a way of being able to attach them on the ceiling without cutting into the ceiling, I don't see that as an issue. You just have to. The one thing about in-ceiling speakers is that you run your speaker wire through the walls in the ceiling. If you're doing on wall, you probably still have to cut into the wall to run your speaker wire anyway. So
unless you don't care that your speaker wire is totally visible.
That's true.
Let's see here. There was another question here. Oh, Rusty Bones. Please ask Robert his thoughts on multiple subs and proper seating distances. That's a pretty big topic.
Oh, Yeah, it is a pretty big. That's like a whole program.
Whole show right there. Yeah.
well, one of the things about multiple subs is that it depends. Obviously, it all depends on your room. And for most situations, one sub is probably adequate. I mean, because most rooms are not that large. But the problem when you're doing dual subs, you could put them on opposite sides of the room. And now you have to realize that since the LFE or the extreme low frequencies are non-directional, you're not going to get a stereo sub effect or anything like that unless you have
a lot of people talk about that, but I don't believe it.
Yeah. It's gonna. I think that's more of how long does the sound take to get to your ear from where each sub is positioned.
So a little bit of so some phasing issues there. The other thing I would say about multiple subs that I do like is that with one sub, you tend, with all subs, you end up with room modes, right? And there are areas in the room where you hear certain frequencies accentuated and other areas of the room where you hear certain frequencies de-accentuated or reduced, attenuated. Having more than one sub properly placed can help smooth that out.
Yes, because you can spend a lot of time moving your sub around trying to find that exact spot, and you might find one spot. Oh yeah, this is really good for the extreme, but then my kind of like up there in the 60 and 70 hertz range, something's not right, And so you compensate using two subs to compensate. That makes that can make a difference. And actually, I've seen systems demonstrated with 4 subs,
I think that's I have too.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not overkill if you can afford it. I mean,
Well, and also if you have a really large room, I think that makes a difference too.
Sure. Beatmaster's pointing out we're talking about iPads and iPhones and playing from them, that they can play uncompressed files, but it's a battery drainer. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't think about that either, because I mean, I use my smartphone for, when I'm doing my reviews, to Bluetooth and stuff like that. But I'm not using it all day long, so I don't know how fast the battery is. But that is a good point. If you're using it a lot, then and I would imagine even with things like, this is not audio, but like when you're doing Chromecasts and things like that, if you have to use your smartphone, that would also be a battery drainer. Over time,
Over time, yeah. Jim 4 is asking, very open-ended question, what is the best personal home theater, less expensive but reasonable? Well, when you're talking about a home theater, you're talking about a lot of different components. So, Robert, why don't you and I go through kind of our favorite budget-conscious, value-oriented, shall we say,
I would say
products in each of the categories.
Okay, well, if you're talking about the audio portion first, and you want a real basic home theater, I would go with one of the Onkyo home theater in a box systems, or a better situation might be to get one of Pioneer or Yamaha's entry-level home theater receivers if you don't need Dolby Atmos and stuff, and get the Pioneer, Andrew Jones Pioneer, inexpensive speaker 5.1 channel speaker system.
I would agree with that.
Andrew Jones is no longer with Pioneer, but his speaker system is.
Yeah, his speaker system is still there, and it's still really good.
Yeah, it's very popular.
Yeah, and it sounds great for the money. I mean, I forget exactly what it is, but even the towers are what, a couple $100 a pair, $300 a pair, something along those lines. Now, Andrew Jones went to this company called ELAC, ELAC, which is a long-established German company, and they're trying to make a comeback into the U.S. They used to be big here in turntables. Now they've hired Andrew Jones, and they're making speakers and now some other electronics as well. And those sound amazing, really, just really incredible. So that's another way to go, is looking at the ELAC debut series and he just now upgraded that to the Unify is the next step up line. The Unify UB5, which 5-inch woofers and a coincident mid-range and tweeter, is $500 a pair for the bookshelf, and that's a little more expensive, but man, oh man, they sound good. Then in terms of the
video.
Well, before we move on from audio, I agree with you that Yamaha. What did you say? Yamaha and Onkyo receivers.
So, right, and Pioneer, which actually, for those that don't know yet, Onkyo owns the AV division of Pioneer. So if you buy a Pioneer receiver, it's basically an Onkyo product.
Right. Okay. All right. They used to be separate, but then Onkyo bought the controlling interest in Pioneer Audio Video a year or two ago, I think now.
Right. Yeah.
I'm also a big fan of Denon and Marantz. They're made by the same company, and they're very good too. And you can get a decent Denon with Atmos, for that matter, in the $600 range, and you can go down below that as well. So you've looked at some Denon and Marantz receivers, haven't you?
Oh yes. Oh yeah. Yeah. One of the one of the Marantz receivers I thought was interesting is they have the slim line. I think it's a 1607. Surprisingly good. It's if you don't have a lot of space, but you still want something that performs pretty well. I think it's the 1607 if I got the model number right. But it's a slim line receiver. It doesn't have the big bulk of most home theater receivers, but it still puts out a pretty, you're not, for a smaller or a medium-sized room, it can still put out quite a bit of power, and you won't have any problem powering most speaker systems with it, unless you're talking esoteric, or something like that. So
yeah. Okay, well then moving on to the video side of things, obviously you can get a flat panel, or you could get a projector.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on maximizing your budget, or minimizing your budget, I should say, and still getting a good picture in either of those categories?
I would say, hands down, if you want a really good performing, and you're gonna say this too, I think, Scott, Vizio P series.
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
50-inch, Ultra HD. With Dolby Vision. Now they are going to have they're getting a firmware upgrade for the HDR10, and that's what, $999. But if that's too much out of your budget, then you can go into their M series, which I don't believe it doesn't have Dolby Vision, but it has.
It does now, though. That's the thing. That's the amazing thing.
It does.
Vizio M series. Okay. The 2016 models now have Dolby Vision as well.
Wow. But I'm wondering well, there's the whole question of nits. That's a whole nother thing. But whether or not they can actually put out the peak brightness as hot. I wonder if the P series could put out more peak brightness than the
I'm sure
M
it can.
Because that would make a difference too. So
yeah, for the high dynamic range. Yeah.
But I would say if you're looking for a flat panel that's very reasonable, I mean, Vizio, go with Vizio, or at least consider Vizio.
I'm with you, man. I'm totally with you. So then, if you wanted to go projector, what are your favorite economy projector brands?
Epson makes a good product.
I agree.
I think they've got like the 2040 series. I think it's like I think you can get it for as low as like $999, $1,200, something in that range now. And one thing I like about Epson, which is, and I do like the DLPs, but what I like about Epson, because they use LCD, is that they are very bright, and you can actually have some ambient light in the room and still get a very viewable image. Now, you have to realize is that unlike TV, if you get, as the ambient light in the room goes up, your blacks are going to start fading. But at least with the amount of light that the Epsons can put out, you can get a very viewable image, even in a room that can't be made completely dark.
And of course, another way to help that is with an ambient light rejecting screen.
Yeah, that's true. Right.
Which will help a lot if you have, some ambient light in the room, and you're going to normally watch with ambient light in the room. Then an ambient light rejecting screen is a great way to go. they tend to be a little more expensive. And we do have to talk about screens here as well, because with a projector, obviously you need a screen. A lot of people say to me, well, can't I just shine it on my wall? And the answer is,
what color is your wall?
What color is your wall?
Your wall is not completely, can't be made completely white. I mean, there's so many different shades of white for wall paint.
Exactly. Plus, there's texture to it, right? I mean, even if it's drywall or plaster or anything, there's a texture to it, and that you're going to see that in the image. Now, there are companies such as, for example, Screen Goo, which make a paint that you can paint onto the wall, but it's really thick. And it ends up with a very smooth surface of the correct color of white that lets you shine onto the wall. So that's a good alternative. And I think sort of a 80, 90, 100-inch screen might cost you a few $100 worth of Screen Goo paint. Now, Leo Laporte, our fearless leader here at Twit, bought a screen from Monoprice and thought that was pretty good for $500 or so. I haven't looked at any screens along those lines. No. I do know that Elite Screens offers quite good screens for quite good prices. Yes, it all depends on the size of the screen. You like Elite Screen?
I like Elite Screens. But I would say the screen that I'm most impressed with is the Black Diamond.
Screen Innovations.
Screen Innovations. I mean, because you got a black screen, but the picture looks great.
They're really great. And that's a totally ambient light rejecting screen.
Yes. You can almost regular room daylight, supposedly.
Yeah.
Of course, it still depends on the projector, but you can actually, But the thing is that I'm thinking is that you pair one of those Epsons with a Black Diamond and with ambient light, and you might be in pretty good shape.
Now, Epson just announced at CE Week this week, and I know you wrote about it on about.com. Their new lineup of high dynamic range capable projectors, which is Epson's first. And the second one on the market. The only other ones for the home are from JVC. Yes. And so my colleague Mark Henninger is at CE Week right now, and he has had a chance to see them. I haven't yet, but he will be writing about that on AVS Forum, so I do recommend that you go check that out. You haven't seen them yet either. Nobody has until in New York this week.
Right.
So,
but
it's a big deal. It's a big deal. It's big news.
It is. Yes. And their whole approach to 4K, of course, JVC's been doing this. This is a whole nother discussion too, but this pixel shifting, and apparently Texas Instruments and Barco are also doing pixel shifting on DLP.
Yes. Texas Instruments is certainly doing that. I've seen that. I haven't seen it on the Barco yet. Yeah. But Optima announced a projector at CES with this that particular chip in it.
Too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think there was one other one too. So that may be the resurrection of DLP. Isn't that interesting?
Yes. Yeah.
There are three different technologies that work with that are used in home projectors: DLP from Texas Instruments, LCD, which Epson is famous for. A few other companies use it as well, and LCOS, liquid crystal on silicon, which is the JVC and the Sony.
Yes.
So each of them have their pluses and minuses.
Yes.
But the DLP kind of that's what's used in commercial cinema almost exclusively. Yes. There are some Sony projectors which use this LCOS technology in commercial cinemas, but DLP is the predominant one. And then you don't find DLP again until you get into the super cheapies, the really inexpensive projectors. Isn't that weird?
But then you're dealing with single chips with color wheels, and you have the rainbow effect.
Yep. Exactly right.
Although one thing that DLP does do very well, and I think it has to do with the way the chip operates, is that if you are a 3D fan, there's no haloing effects with DLP. And I don't know the specific reason why, but now LCD is brighter, and so you have that issue. But in terms of like haloing effects and motion blur and stuff like that, DLP is a little bit better on that if you're a 3D fan.
if you're a 3D fan, which some people are. A lot of people aren't. You're a 3D fan? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Isn't it interesting how 3D became such a big deal in TVs and home theaters and stuff, and now it's basically gone.
Right.
After what, 4, 5, 6 years, something like that. Whereas in the commercial cinema, it's going strong. Virtually every big movie that comes out, it comes out in Real D 3D or IMAX 3D, even though it doesn't come out on Blu-ray that way. We were talking about Atmos, and this is sort of the same thing here.
Yeah, well, I think part of it has to do with the venue, the different, you know, but also too, I think the TV manufacturers just blew it on marketing. You had two incompatible systems with the with the passive and the active, and you couldn't use the same glasses on each, and it was just a whole mix up. And then there were like they didn't have like enough. They didn't have general. In other words, like Panasonic only was releasing 3D movies with their product, and Samsung was releasing movies just for their product.
Yeah,
I think it's more of that type of system. But I think it was more of a political type thing than the actual technology itself.
Good point. Very good point. Yeah. Very good point. Okay, well, we got a lot more questions to get to, but before we do, I'd like to thank our second sponsor for this episode, which is Corning. Corning can greatly improve your audio-video workflow with their strong, durable, and far-reaching Thunderbolt and USB 3.0 fiber optic cables. Whether you're into high-end video, photography, audio production, or computing, Corning's cables will allow you to build a convenient workspace through a superior long-distance connection. Corning's USB 3.0 and Thunderbolt cables are incredibly strong and flexible. They have exceptional cable runs of up to 60 meters, or 200 feet for Thunderbolt, and 50 meters, or 165 feet for USB 3. Making it so easy to move noisy, space-consuming devices away from your workspace. Corning's cables are also hot swappable, and you can daisy chain up to 6 Thunderbolt devices. You can also bend or walk on Corning's ultra-slim cables. Even if they're tangled, they will keep transmitting at top speed. Now, Universal Audio relies on optical cables by Corning to achieve acoustic isolation in their studio, where they test new equipment such as their best-selling Thunderbolt audio interfaces. And I can tell you from my time in the professional audio realm, Universal Audio is one of the most well-respected makers of these interfaces in the world. And they do know what they're doing, so I would certainly trust their use of the optical cables by Corning here. And so instead of investing in multiple extenders, adapters, and cables, turn to Corning to establish the connection you need with one simple, long-length cable. Corning's products are available at all major electronics and professional AV retailers, including Apple stores, Amazon, B&H, and more. Corning's cables are longer, thinner, lighter, and stronger. Go to corning.com/twit to save up to $130 on Thunderbolt optical cables. This promotion is valid only from June 1st to July 31st, or while supplies last, whichever comes first. Just go to corning.com/twit to save on their unbeatable Thunderbolt cables. And we thank Corning very much for their support of Home Theater Geeks. So iPhone 81074 in the chat room asks, what do you know about what Onkyo has done, or if they've said anything about HDMI 2.0A? I'm pretty sure that their 2016 receivers must have 2.0A, right?
As far as I know, all their 2016 receivers have HDMI 2.0A. And I am not sure if on the receiver, like for instance, let's say you have 5 HDMI inputs. I'm not sure if all 5 are going to have the HDCP 2.2 copy protection.
Mm-hmm. Those are the two things that have to be together. They have to be together.
Right. To do the HDR and
correct.
The 4K, and the 4K streaming and all that. Right. But as far as I know, all their receivers do have HDMI 2.0A compatibility. I haven't heard anything different, so I'm assuming if someone runs into a problem with that, definitely contact Onkyo tech support. But I think that they're all 2.0A at this point.
Yeah, I would think so too. Now, several years ago, Onkyo had a problem with its HDMI boards within their AV receivers. That's been solved now, hasn't it?
As far as I know, in fact, what's interesting is that one of the receivers I have is an Onkyo 705, which is one of the first receivers from that era where they did have problems. But I didn't have that problem on mine so far. I mean,
it wasn't universal. It didn't happen to everybody, but it did happen enough that they got kind of worried about it
But I started getting emails and stuff like that about it, and I go, I haven't encountered that on mine. So I always kept referring people to Onkyo Tech. I know, of course, Onkyo came out with a thing at one point where they were doing some free repairs for a period of time or something like that on some specific models. But that was several years ago. I don't know if it's been an issue since.
Yeah, I agree. Hermes and Emily the Strange are actually asking two related questions, so let me pose them both here. Hermes is saying, OLED used to be all the rage. Is there a new OLED? And we're talking, of course, about OLED, organic light-emitting diode flat panel TVs. And Emily the Strange follows up with, any idea if plasma TVs, maybe with some new breakthrough, will make a return, or are plasmas just forgotten and gone forever? So the first question is, I think OLED is still all the rage, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is that in the U.S. market, because I know in China, I think they may have one or two other brands, but I'm not sure. But LG, what happened is that Samsung and LG both came out at the same time with a product, but for some reason, Samsung totally dropped out. And it might have something to do with their SUHD project, situation. But LG has been pushing and pushing and pushing, and you got to give them credit. They're the only ones in the market with OLED, and they managed to bring the production, make the production efficient, bring the prices down, although they are still much
pretty
more
expensive. Yeah,
but. But considering what they started out with, and almost all their models now are 4K, and thank goodness they backtracked a lot on the curved concept, and now they're doing mostly flat.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Yes. And
I'm a 3D
fan,
models, but I don't like curved.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. And interestingly, all of their OLEDs for 2016, except the bottom, except for the B6, but the C6, the E6, and the G6 still have 3D. So it's not gone altogether.
Yes.
But I would say that that's still all the rage. It's still sort of the benchmark. That and in fact, we'll see after the Value Electronics flat panel shootout, which is going on as we speak. The OLED is in there, and the flagships from Sony and Samsung and even Vizio is in there. Everybody is expecting the OLED to win.
I wonder if they're going to do an HDR component on the test this year.
They are this year.
Well, because I remember that when Samsung first came out with all their HDR product, they said, OLED can't do HDR. And lo and behold, LG says, yes, we can. And they did it.
Now, the OLED can't get to the extreme high brightness that LCD can. But dynamic range really is about the distance between the brightest and the darkest that the TV or any display can do. And whereas the OLED is not as bright, it can get a whole heck of a lot darker black.
Right.
So the dynamic range is still there. It's just shifted downward compared to LCD, which is good, especially in a dark room. Now, in a brighter room with a lot of ambient light, which Samsung and Sony will tell you is how most people watch TV most of the time.
That's true.
Then they say that's why you need an LCD, because it's got the higher brightness.
Right.
And, you know, there is something to be said for that. But for pure picture quality and deep levels of black, which is really one of the primary areas of picture quality, I really like the OLED for sure.
Right.
Now, have you heard, I've started to hear sort of little whispers about the possibility of quantum dots being used in an emissive way. At the moment, they're used. Yeah, at the moment they're used as backlights for LCD TVs. But what if they were used as the actual source of light themselves? And I've heard some things about that.
Remember at CES a couple years ago, Sony showed a demo of something called crystal. Some sort of crystal LED or something like that.
And that was
supposed to be, there was supposed to be their response to OLED or something. And it got, of course, it totally disappeared. But I wonder if it's something like that.
I wonder too. Exactly.
Because
I don't know.
It looked great. I mean, it looked fine. But obviously, just based on one demo at one show,
in the middle of a show floor with a ton of ambient light.
Right.
Never a good place. Never a good place to really be looking at TVs to critically evaluate them. But in any event,
I'm wondering if maybe something like that might end up coming out of China with TCL or something like that, taking a gamble on that rather than Samsung or LG taking the gamble on it. I don't know.
I don't know either. That's something it'll be interesting to see in the future. Now, as to Emily the Strange's question, I think it was Emily the Strange. Yes, it was. Will plasmas ever come back, or are they gone, dead and gone, and rest in peace?
Well, there's the issue with plasma, and I don't know if you might have a different perspective on this, but in 2014, plasma TV technology actually celebrated their 50th anniversary.
Oh, and then, my goodness.
And now, of course, that was the year that Panasonic, LG, and Samsung all quit. But I think part of the issue with plasma was that it was really difficult to do 4K plasma in a cost-effective way. And also the brightness level. In other words, you couldn't do, I don't think, unless they really dug into the research, you could do things like HDR and wide color gamut maybe, but the HDR and some of the other processing technologies in plasma that you can do with an LCD. But I don't know what's your perspective. What is your perspective on that?
Well, I agree with you on all that stuff. It was hard if not impossible to make 4K. The dynamic range might have been a problem. Compy 386 in the chat room is making a great point in this regard, that plasmas had energy efficiency problems.
Yes.
You know, I remember, in fact, my colleague Mark Henninger has talked sometimes about the plasma that he has, a Samsung F8500.
Yeah.
You know, basically acting as a heater in the room.
Yeah.
So, you know, they get really hot. So that was another problem.
And then
Mike
when
Tyson,
yeah,
go ahead.
I was going to say, and once you put in all the other extra features like streaming and 3D and all that the power consumption goes up even more in terms of what, like the state of California counts as energy efficiency, that type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Mike Heiss is pointing out in the chat room, OLED is the new plasma. And I think that's really, I think that's the crux of the matter there. Absolutely.
Right.
Now, interestingly, UJ said, speaking of plasma, they had a Pioneer Kuro Elite at the 2016 shootout, the shootout they're doing right now. I didn't know they were going to do that.
Now, that's
how interesting.
I'm curious to see the results on that.
Yeah, I don't think it's obviously not going to be in the competition per se, because it's 1080p. It's not high dynamic range,
right?
You know, so there's all sorts of reasons why it can't really compete with what's there as the 2016 models. But I think just sort of as a reminder of, hey, look where we used to. We got something really good with plasma, and now we're trying to get to that again and surpass it, which I think HDR does. I mean, I think tell me if you agree, but I imagine you probably do, that high dynamic range is a wonderful thing.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it just and not only that, but I reviewed one of Samsung's this is an 8550 last year's model, and even on non-HDR content, I mean it still puts out more brightness. Even for regular stuff, it puts out more brightness. So. I don't, but with HDR, she was, like, for instance, Gods of Egypt, not Gods of Egypt, but the one about Moses from
Exodus.
Exodus, yes. Like on the armor where they had the gold highlights, the gold leaf highlights and all that. It's like, oh my God, you don't even notice that in the regular when you watch it on a regular TV, but on high dynamic range, you go, wow. Yeah, that is just really amazing.
Exactly.
And it doesn't look over. In other words, it doesn't look like blue. It doesn't bloom. It looks accurate.
Well, yeah, exactly. Looks more like you're looking at reality, at real life.
Yes.
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. Let me see here. Oh, Creamy Corncob had a question about the Xbox One S, which I knew that I hoped somebody would ask this question. Just coming in a few months, does HDR playback for $299? Is that the cheapest HDR playback device to date? I think it is, as far as I know.
Yes, Samsung is $399 unless it's heavily discounted at retail, which I don't think it is yet. Right. And the Xbox One S comes out at the end of August, and that's going to be the only the second player that has the 4K with HDR, Ultra HD Blu-ray playback.
Right.
Now, the question that I haven't been able to get an answer to yet is whether or not, and I think it does because the format specs require it, but there's no mention of Dolby Atmos and DTS:X compatibility. But I would assume
I would assume so too.
Yeah. But I didn't commit to that.
Right. In your write-up, as I didn't either, because it didn't say so in the press release. But as you say, it's a mandatory thing for Ultra HD Blu-ray players. Now, this is a game console, so does it have to follow the same rules exactly? I'm not 100% sure. I would assume so, and I would hope so.
And the only other issue I have is it only has one HDMI output. So, like, if you have a non-HDR compatible home theater receiver, you're kind of stuck on the. In other words, you can't split the audio and the video. You can. Right. In other words, you can't. So in other words, if you do your audio separately, you're going to end up with just Dolby Digital or DTS rather than, because I think it's an optical output. So you're not going to get Dolby Atmos, that type of stuff.
Exactly. Undermined is pointing out, getting back to quantum dots as emissive displays, that Samsung is doing something that they're calling QLED, and HD Guru has an article about it that Undermined has linked to about Nanosys, which is one of the quantum dot companies.
Yes.
That they actually, Samsung had a press junket to Nanosys up in Northern California recently, and they did say something about that as well.
Right.
Well, now this is interesting. THX1138 says the recently announced Xbox One S console will support 4K and HDR10, which is one of the two HDR formats, but no UHD Blu-ray drive. I thought it did have a UHD Blu-ray.
I thought that it. I thought the way I'm thinking is that it does have a UHD Blu-ray drive, but that the games that they're making for Xbox One S will have HDR, but they will be 1080p. Mm-hmm. Now that, and then Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, Creamy Corncob is elaborating on that, saying 4K is upscaled on the Xbox One S. The Scorpio, which comes at the end of next year, will be true 4K. See, so there's all sorts of stuff swirling around about these things that we don't really know.
Yeah, well, and I think that's for the games. I think as far as the Blu-ray disc drive, it's an Ultra H. Everything that I've seen, it points that it labels it as a Ultra HD Blu-ray drive. But if I'm wrong, I will apologize. But I think but I think it is a UA. I'll have to look back at my sources again. But I think the 4K upscaling and stuff has more to do with the gaming side. Oh, of course, it'll upscale regular Blu-rays, of course, too. But I mean, if you put an Ultra HD Blu-ray disc in the drive, it's going to play it.
Yeah,
which means it would have to be an Ultra HD drive.
Yeah, exactly right. Which means it'll need to follow the requirements for an Ultra HD Blu-ray player.
Right. And speaking of Blu-ray, this week is Blu-ray's 10th anniversary.
Oh yeah, you wrote a piece about that on About.com. Well, happy birthday to Blu-ray.
But what's really ironic is Samsung, and I still have the original Samsung player.
No kidding, the BDP 1000. I remember that.
That photo on my article is a photo I took last week of that player. I still have it.
It's now 10 years old.
But here's the interesting point. Samsung, in the U.S. market, Samsung was the first one to have a Blu-ray disc player. And in Ultra HD, they're the first one to have an Ultra HD player. I thought that was kind of ironic.
Very good. Yes, indeed. 10 years almost to the day. Wow. What do you know? Yeah. Okay. THX1138 says streaming only, no UHD drive. Well, you know what? You and I both have a little research to do then.
Yeah.
Because we were both under the impression that the Xbox One S had a UHD Blu-ray drive. And if that's not true, then we're mistaken, and we need to update our coverage of this device.
Well, I'll have to check the original quotes and the original press release, and because then that means that some of the primary sources would have gotten it wrong. We'll have to check.
We'll have to check. And in fact, Creamy Corncob and Mike Heiss in the chat room are both saying wrong.
They're agreeing with us.
They're agreeing with us. Yes.
Yeah.
So
that's what I'm thinking.
There you go. I think. No. Well, listen, we've come to the end of a fascinating hour. Great conversation. I want to end with this. Compter in the chat room is reporting, and we're going to talk about this at length next week, that the LG G6 won the shootout. In fact, it won every category except daytime viewing, which the Sony won.
That's interesting.
Basically a sweep by LG G6. So, wow. Well, we're going to have a lot to talk about next week, and I do hope you will join us for that. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it in a second, but for the moment, I want to thank Robert Silva so much for being here today to help me answer questions from the chat room. It's been really great fun. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Scott, for having me. I always enjoy it, and I follow the podcast and when your show with Leo too as well. So I really enjoy it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You certainly know a lot of stuff about it, and well deserved the title home theater expert at about.com. You can read a lot more of Robert's stuff at hometheater.about.com. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you.
So you can find me, of course, at avsforum.com. You can email me at scott@twit.tv, and you can follow me on Twitter at htgeekscott and at avsforum, where Mark Henninger is now currently live tweeting from the Value Electronics Flat Panel Shootout and CE Week. You can always find previous episodes of Home Theater Geeks right here at twit.tv/htg. and on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/twit Home Theater Geeks. Next week, as I said, we will be talking about the results of the Value Electronics Flat Panel TV Shootout. Scheduled to be here will be Robert Zone, the owner of Value Electronics, who puts on the event, Joel Silver, the president of the Imaging Science Foundation, who was presiding over the festivities, and David McKenzie, one of the calibrators who calibrated all the sets for the shootout. So we're going to have a lot to talk about next week. I do hope you will join us for that. Until then, geek out.